everyone, it's Book of Katherine, and I'm here today to just do a little chart for you about who owns the media, who actually runs the media, who actually does their agenda, who pays for them, who does the astroturfing. If you don't know what astroturfing is, you can read Smear by Cheryl Atkinson. I've written about her, and you can see her little 10-minute TED Talks video here about astroturfing, who runs Wikipedia and who pays for, she talks about who pays for all the media. All the media headlines are paid for, but she says they're paid by 501c3s, mystery organizations. And I'm going to answer for you today who's behind those mystery organizations. Are you ready? Let's do it. So if you've been watching my videos for the last month or two, you may know some of this, but I'm going to outline it for you in a quick video that actually does it one by one by one by one. So, and you can look this all up online and check it out for yourselves and you'll find it. So, okay, again, Cheryl Atkinson's The Smear. You'll even see diggers in the back. The very last chapter ends with diggers, but she gives a ton of dirt on things like the things that Google has paid for, the campaigns that Google has paid for. She even named some of the things that the 501c3s hire. But that's just the money. The 501c3s are basically charities. A 501c3 is a charity. Like say that you register as a charity and you want to be, charities are nonprofits. A 501c3 is a nonprofit organization underneath our laws. So right now in America, if you are a political organization, you can say that you can register as a 501c3, and that means all your activities are listed as a nonprofit, and then you get a tax ride, like you don't have to pay taxes. Same thing as a church, same thing as those sorts of things. You register as a charity, and then you get to be free from taxes. But a lot of times when you register as a 501c3, you just become a name, and then no one knows who's behind the name. So anyone can fund you and donate to your charity, but no one knows who that is. And so what she said in this was, the entire media industry, and now we know across the globe, the entire media industry is no longer people reporting the news, journalists going out and finding the news and then reporting it. She breaks down like page by page by page how all the media today is actually these 501c3s going through and actually paying for the headlines. So when you see a CNN report, each one of those segments is actually paid for by a 501c3 with their own agenda, and they're buying that agenda and they're buying that segment. And she even outlines like the journalists, like these like transactional journalism, they will actually say the phrases that they want saying in these stories. So when you see things from The Hill and you see things in the Wall Street Journal, they'll pay to actually say certain phrases that they want in the actual article. They're like, we want our article to say this and use these words and phrases in the article. So this breaks down that all the media you see today is paid, but I'm going to outline who is paying for it, who is behind the 501c3s, which is very, very exciting. Okay, so here is the basic chart. So here is the media. Here is you're receiving the media. This is Twitter. She outlines it all, like what you see on Twitter, what you see on YouTube, what you see on social media, all social media on Facebook, what you see on CNN, on TV, all the broadcasters, like all the different types of media. That's what's included in this. And then it comes to you. It's all meant to reach you and influence your vote. Or your buying habits, everything. Like it's meant to change your behavior, your buying habits, etc., etc. And so here's how it works. So there are 174 countries in this world. It changes, but 174 countries. Now, not all countries are democracies. America is the only one that has is a democracy. And not only that, there are other democracies, but ours is the only democracy that allows you to vote at a local level, like for your mayor or for your city council and for your state, and then for your federal government. We're the only ones that allow you to vote on all those different levels. And we have elections throughout the year. So there are some states where you can vote like 12 times throughout the year because you're so involved in your government, right? So that's why I get upset when people say they want a voting day, because that they say make a certain voting day a national holiday, because we have so many different voting days. And only socialist countries have one voting day. Like the more socialist countries in Western Europe, they have one voting day, and that's it. They have one day, and then those leaders get to do whatever they want for the rest of the year. That's the only time the people have a voice. And it's led to, horrific policies. And that's what led to the EU taking over and the UN taking over there. The people no longer have democracies over there. It's become very, very socialist over there. They pass like 80 laws a day, the EU over there. And it's the small businesses, Europe used to be all small businesses, all individual businesses. There didn't used to be Starbucks there. And now it's all been wiped out by corporate businesses. And that's all because the democracies, they didn't have enough of a voice. So America has democracies at a much, much bigger level and stuff. And there's been this media thing has been used to wipe out that fact. And it's kind of hard to find out your voting days. You have to work at that. But I've been trying to help you guys with that through Clean the GOP. So here's how it works. In those other countries, there's like dictatorships, totalitarian regimes where one party's in charge or one dictator's in charge, and the rest of the country just has to follow along. And like you're jailed if you have a different religion, like there's a state religion. You're jailed if you try to protest. You're jailed if you try to, do something like wear makeup or dance. So regimes around the world are very different than like Western countries. They're very, very different. And so these countries and these dictators, because they're in charge of everything, they control the wealth. They're very, very wealthy and very, very powerful. Like, for example, in Saudi Arabia and Iran, the dictators are extremely powerful. The princes and everything, they have a lot of money. They fly around in jets, but the people themselves are extremely poor. They're dirt poor. They don't have any of the wealth. But America, there's wealth across, like people who are living, who you can have a Louis Vuitton, kids in high school are carrying around Louis Vuitton wallets. That doesn't happen in other countries, right? So the other countries, these dictators are very, very wealthy and powerful. So they're part of the rich and powerful of the world. It's not just Western countries that have Western. For example, China has 1 million millionaires. 1 million of them. America doesn't have 1 million millionaires, and it has 500 billionaires. And America has like half that. So, but the rich and powerful also are included that are doing this, that control the media down here. And I'm going to draw for you how it controls the media. So we have 174 countries, and then we have the rich and powerful. And we've nailed this down to things like, they've called them the Good Club. The media has written about this, the Good Club. People like Oprah and Soros and Warren Buffett, they get together and they work on this thing. The Good Club, and there's other groups that meet together. And what happens is these 174 countries and the rich and powerful, they negotiate all year long. And you see it going back and forth. These countries do these negotiations on what's called an agenda. They work on this agenda. Now, people sometimes call it the left agenda in the media. But really, it's an agenda that covers all different areas of life. It covers how you buy, what companies you buy, what you're going to watch, what you're going to be seeing on TV, the movies that you're going to be seeing. I mean, it's not just politics. It's this entire agenda that you're going to hear through like a loudspeaker. And so what they do is they negotiate this agenda all year. But the way that you don't know about it is that when they come together, they meet on a yearly, like they do it once a year. And they meet at this big climate change conference. And that's the thing, is no one's ever caught it because it's done at a thing called a climate change conference. And they've been meeting every year for like 24 years now, ever since 1992. The first one was done in 1992. And they were meeting before that, but they signed something, an agreement for everyone to come together under the same agenda in 1992. And Warren Buffett was doing it. They had Al Gore down there. They had John Kerry down there. John Kerry's with the Forbes family. And Katherine Graham of the Wall Street Journal was doing meetings ahead of time. Like there are all these meetings coming together to get ready for this. And then it came together. And ever since, they've all been meeting. And you'll see it like the Good Club. What they do is it says in the articles about the Good Club, they come together to discuss climate change agendas. Now, how do we know that it actually has to do with all areas of your life, that the media actually does? Because what they produce out of these climate change conferences are what are called 17 global goals. And right now, that 17 global goals is called Agenda 2030. But if you look up, if you Google Agenda 2030, it's actually an agenda And this is the UN. They're not a government body. They're supposed to be a peacekeeping body that has to do with negotiating peace between countries if there's war. But instead, they're meeting under these climate change conferences, and what they're doing is they're actually doing government policies on, for every government in the world, on universal health care. Actually, 17 areas of life. They have it for health. They have it for water, how every country is supposed to handle their water. They have it for how every country is supposed to handle their energy. They have it for every country supposed to handle their equality, including transgender rights. We find out that when you go through it, that's where the Me Too movement came from. It's all the he for she movement came from. Things like the Santa and the Santa being gender neutral, things like that. So there's a whole bunch of things. It's 17 areas, but it's everything from like what you eat, like the food and everything. And when you go through each of these agenda items, there's like 8 points underneath each one of them. And every one of them is like a socialist system that every one of these countries is supposed to provide. But the difference is that the UN isn't actually paying for it. They require each of these countries to pay for all these programs. What they do is they outline all these social programs that they want every country. And what's interesting is that the UN is doing this. This is the UN climate change conferences. Now, I want you to know something. 174 countries, most of whom don't elect their leaders, and the rich and powerful, the good club, none of whom are elected. And then they come together and they do this agenda. Notice that none of us are there. Like, we weren't told about it. We don't know about it. And when you watch these climate change conferences, and if you look at pictures of them, what they call are, look up what's called high-level segments. That's when they get to the highest level. It's the end of the conference, and they have all their lawyers at a table, and they're hashing out the final parts of this agenda, what they're going to do for the next year. And like the year the Me Too movement came out, they actually had like all this logo for it, and they had a he said, she said logo. Right before, not Me Too, but they had a he said, she said logo, and they put it out, and the next month they did all of the presidential debates as he said, she said. Like, they outlined that. They put out that agenda, and then the whole media did all the debates as he said, she said for the Hillary versus Donald Trump Clinton debates. That was the agenda, and you can see it right there at the conference. I believe it is in Marrakesh. And so it actually said climate change, but in the corner it had a logo of these two bubbles. If you look up that bubble, in it, it says he said, she said, and the he said is small and the she said is big. And they did this whole agenda of like making sure the she said's bigger and the he said is smaller. And so when everyone said, like, when you look up the money, that, the Clinton side was funded by all these other countries, and people were like, it didn't make sense. She's funded. It does when you start looking at this. This makes sense. Like when you start looking at it and you find the agenda of the media, it suddenly all falls into place. So what happens is these 74 countries come together. When you see all the things in the media saying, oh, Poland is, negotiating with Germany on the upcoming climate change conference, or India is negotiating with China on the upcoming climate change conference. All of that is negotiating this big media agenda that's coming up, and the agenda from the state, local, and government level for your lives, right? So what happens is this climate change conference happens, they come together, they make a global goal for Agenda 2030, and it has equality, women empowerment. So that's why men's rights aren't spoken about anymore. They actually have posters with women on it, like big posters with women, like we're going to focus on women. And then when you go through the things of the healthcare systems they want, men aren't mentioned everything. They want all women's birthing covered. They want women's contraception covered. Like, it's like, we want free healthcare for women, and men aren't mentioned anywhere. It's very fascinating. So now you see these men's rights movements going like, we're being left out of everything. We don't understand why. Well, once you look at this UN agenda, you can see why. But they're not a government body. No one nominated them. No one votes for them. This is the rich and powerful are making this agenda. Why are they doing it? Why are they doing this like urbanization thing? Well, what it comes down to is, we'll get to that later. So then what they do is they take this huge agenda, they write it out. It's a huge document this long, and it outlines everything they want the press and the media to do that year. And then they want everything the state, local, and government levels to do in the programs that they want them to do. Then they hand it to a lawyer office called ICLEI, and ICLEI whitewashes the UN's hands of it, and then they hand down, kind of like Perkins and Coie do in DC, they whitewash, they do it for all the politicians, it's a common practice. And then what they do is they hand it down to NGOs and charities. So NGOs are things like Amnesty International and Oxfam, just about every charity you've ever heard of, like Bread for America or Bread for the World, St. Jude's, like there's just like every single charity you can think of, like even the Clinton Foundation, like works when you said Clinton Cash, like it works with 174 countries. But all of them, when you finally get to their financials, give less than 10% to the actual charity that they say. The rest of it, they either hold on to themselves, the rich hold on to, or they donate to other political organizations like this, to do the politics that they want, this agenda. So what happens is they give it to ICLEI, then they give it to these NGOs and charities, and then local and city government programs, like the programs that you find out, like they fund things at your YMCA, or they fund even fitness classes or health programs in your local things. Like I found a local health program here in my own town. And of course, everything in the health is like not good for you. But they hand out all these things. And what they do is they cover it up with the 501c3s. They're all charities. And so you can't see who's behind the money. But the way that we know it's the climate change and the rich and powerful is because the media and everything they say to a T is everything listed in this climate change agenda. When you look up Agenda 2030, it is verbatim everything that you see in the media. Everything you see, like it's everything's sustainable development. Everything's covered underneath sustainable development. It is to a T. When everybody goes, the left's gone crazy, this is happening, the left's gone crazy, this is happening. Not when you actually start reading Agenda 2030, when you start reading what's happening at the climate change conferences. If you read what they put out every year, you can actually predict what's going to happen. And you can see every single thing that's happened in the last 25 years, the climate change conferences listed before they happened. And everything they put out is a 501c3. And not only that, but these 501c3s, when you start looking at the charities, some will say they're a UN charities. The other ones, when you start looking at them, like even another way you can tie it to them is when you look at these UN programs, the UNs that they say they're the UN, they actually do governance awards. They actually hand the media awards every year. Like they have a Canadian Sustainable Development Goals Governance Awards. They hand the media out across the globe, even in Ghana. They hold these big banquets and they hand out awards for governing, meaning, good job, you did our Agenda 2030, you did our climate change agenda, you did this leftist agenda, because it's all socialism at the end of the day. You said what we wanted to say. So when they wanted fur banned, they put that out and it got banned. But it wasn't banned by any law. No country made that a law. The media made it not okay. When they want a PC put out, which is a socialist agenda, it's only done in China, a socialist country, or in the Soviet Union, a socialist regime. The media made PC something. The media did that for the UN. They enforced socialism onto Western countries that were democracies. No one voted for PC. It's not a law, but they did it through the media, through basically bullying and intimidation, by paying the media through these 501c3s and astroturfing, and by doing governance awards for 25 years. So even when astroturfing wasn't the main form, they were doing governance awards and handing out big awards. And so all the journalists had these big awards to like try and earn. And so when they say a journalist has received more awards than anyone else, this is what they're referring to. Almost every awards thing you can trace back to a UN foundation. It's very fascinating. And then it reaches you. So why do they want to do all this? Like, why do they work so hard on this climate change agenda? Why do they want all of this? Why are they? That's a lot of effort to go through. What's the point of it? And why do they work so hard on creating basically a constitution every year, for everyone to fall in line with on a state, local, and government level? Why are they doing that? And the reason they're doing that is because all of these are socialized programs that governments can't pay for. Like, it's on 17 areas of life: water, energy, power, health. It's not just healthcare. It's socialized programs on every area of life. And they'll break the bank of a government. Like, you have to have people working in order to in order to produce. And what happens is that Greece ended up breaking, Sweden ended up breaking, South Africa started breaking. All these governments in Venezuela broke, and all these banks started breaking. What happens is the World Bank, which is the UN, steps in and says, we'll offer you loans. Just the way that all these countries throughout Africa are doing. They're taking loans from China, but really China's being funded. I found that out. I found out that China is just taking all their loans from the World Bank. China is the #1 socialist country, and socialism breaks the bank. It doesn't survive. It's just been running for the UN. The World Bank's been helping out China. Every movement they do, the World Bank funds, and the World Bank tells them what to do. I found it. You look for the World Bank's sustainable development and China, and you find out that everything China's ever done, it's not the CCP. It's the World Bank directing them. And so through the World Bank, they're taking over Africa. So the UN is taking control. And so when you hear things like, oh, in the UN, China owns all these votes, no, it's the agenda. It's a socialist agenda that's taking over all of these votes. America used to own, democracy used to own all the African votes. And now socialism is taking it over. And so these socialist agendas and stuff, and they colonize Africa with China, but then when that happens, the yen takes over, and that's a socialist regime that takes over, and the people go into slavery, and and individualism dies. These countries and these cultures die, and it's unfortunate because the Chinese have extremely racist attitudes towards the African people, and that's really covered up in the media. If you find some of their commercials that involved the Africans, it's just horrific, So, and some of their museum art, it's really terrifying. So it's something you want to preserve cultures and so that they can grow and thrive, and help them grow. So that's why when these left things come down, it sounds all great and everything like that. The media says they're all great. Just know that they're paid, and this is where the money comes from. And so read Cheryl's books. I dropped it and I can't bend down. Sorry, too disabled to do that. Can't move my spine. Read her book and you'll hear all about the 501c3s. But now when you read it, just be like, I know who's behind all the 501c3s. And it's behind, she says, there's right and left 501c3s. Well, the right and left, we've learned, are all pushing climate change just different ways. Like the right takes some of the UN goals and the left takes some of the other UN agenda goals. And they take the same. But all of them push this world movement that's happening of a wealth gap that goes like this. And that's what socialism does. It pushes a wealth gap like this, so that our money goes down and their money goes up. And that's why these guys push it, because their money just goes skyrocketing. And ever since they, did it in 1992, the wealth gap just went, and it's been like that ever since, no matter what president, Obama, Bush, Clinton, whoever was in office, this just kept going. And that's because this agenda has been going. But now that we have new people in office that are not politicians, that don't need to be paid and don't need to take lobbying money, which is all these 501c3s, or people that really hate lobbying and work for themselves, and a lot of freedom fighters are going in, they're all disconnecting from it. They're all not, and they see this. They've been disconnecting from the climate change. A lot of them started disconnecting from it because they knew they had researched climate change, and they were like, this is bogus. What are you talking about? And I think that's irrelevant, whether or not climate change is or not. You can research it for yourself. But now you know why they were saying when ClimateGate came out and all these poor climate scientists were like, I was so fooled, I found out that the UN was funding all these scientists to lie. Why would they do that? And now you know why. Now you know why. They had an agenda to protect, because if they lost the climate change heading, then everybody would look at what else they were doing, which is a socialist agenda, for the rest of the world, and paying the media. So that's who is behind the media. I hope that helps you. I hope that provides a simple solution. And just remember that as you go forward in 2019, all these things you see in tweets, when they all sound like the same thing and they tell you the next new thing and they do the next new movement and they're all in accord, remember that they're not the law. They are doing it that way because they don't own you. They're trying to own you. They're trying to get your government they're trying to change your behavior so that you vote a different way, so that you vote on green bills, so that you vote on environmental things. Every environmental law is really socialism covered up. Like in 1976, they did a land settlement thing, and they said under environmentalism, if you read it, it talks about, it's a social injustice for anyone to own private land. And you think that you own private land in America, and you don't. You don't. because the government has a say in everything you build. You have to get a permit. You have to get permission for the government for everything you do on your private land. You can't even build like certain ways. Everything is the public good comes over what you do on the private land. It didn't used to be like that. If you bought your land, the land was yours and you did what you wanted on it. Now you have to consider the public good first. You know, you have to go to your government. You have to go to your government. You have to go to your government. In other countries, you have to bribe. You have to bribe. You have to bribe. And America used to be free of that. You know, America used to be like, you know, capitalist. We're not capitalist anymore. You know, we're more socialist. But if we remove the UN's influence, you know, and things like that, and we you know, remove all these regulations, which are actually not based in any fact, and you know why they happened, you know, we get to be set free again, because that is where all the innovation happened. I talked about in my first video of the year, I talked about the Wright brothers. We took flight. Americans were the first one to take flight because we were free, because we were in a society where, you know, people had the individual rights and individual freedom to do whatever it is they wanted to do. And that's where we grow. You know, obviously there are laws that should prevent us from being brutal to each other, but there is a line. There's freedom, you know, where we're able to be totally a brutal society. And then there's a balance where everyone's free and just has some, you know, laws and standards that help us not kill each other. And we learned that that was free speech and free expression, and then laws against, then the one boundary was you can't incite violence. You know, you can't say, you know, go kill that man. And then there's the other extreme, which is you say you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot speak this way, you cannot say that. And that's why you hear it. You know we're living socialism because you hear people so often say, oh, I'm not allowed to say that. Oh, we're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed because the rich 174 countries and their dictators and the rich and powerful and people like the Good Club have paid the media a hell of a lot of money to make you feel like you're not allowed. But that's not what our Constitution says. That's not what our law says. And if you go to court, they haven't ruled that PC is a law. Congratulations. You are free to wear what you want and do what you want. Peace out, you guys. Happy New Year. Bye. Read Cheryl Atkinson's book. It's amazing. Smear. And have a great New Year. Share. Please share. Please share the information. Or make your own charts. Share it on Twitter. I made like a tree on Twitter. And was like, here's like a tree. Here's the roots of the left. Here's the climate change agenda. And then here's the fruit they produce. But we are voters. We're not on the tree. We can vote outside of it. They don't own us. Bye.